your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. I trust that everyone had an enjoyable weekend, got enough rest, and ready for the Monday morning drive, the Monday morning commute to work. For those of you who have to go to work, today is August the 18th and getting near to reopening of schools again after the summer. So enjoy the rest of it, because after that you're going to start to have to deal with the hectic traffic in the mornings, dropping the kids off to school, picking them back up again. For some, it may appear to be a burden. For others, they're thankful that they're able to send their kids to school, able to pick them up, able to hug them, able to say, I love you. So while some may think it's a burden, the majority, most think it's a blessing. We certainly are blessed here in the Cayman Islands. We seem to have a little inclement weather surrounding us, but again, we're thankful for the rain. We need it. So our blessings come in different forms. So what you may see as a distraction, sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. So I want to say good morning to you and welcome to For the Record, whether you're here in the Cayman Islands or if you're listening overseas via the web, and we know that many people listen overseas as well. Of course, For the Record is a show produced by Radio Cayman specifically for you, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out in a local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor. They also call me OC. And you can join me on For the Record every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 until 9:30 in the morning. Our phone lines are always open, and we always say this is your radio station. This is your show. So there is always someone waiting to take your call. Of course, we can be reached on several phone numbers. We have a toll-free number, which is 1-800-534-8255. Two landlines, 949-8037 and 949-6990. And you can also email us at fortherecord. That's For the Record, one word, at candw.ky. That's in the event that you don't like to talk on the telephone. Our scheduled guest this morning is the Honorable Minister of Finance, Honorable Marco Archer, and he will be with us shortly. Meanwhile, I want to remind you that For the Record is brought to you by Champion House Restaurant 2 and the Champion House Cafe. Champion House Restaurant 2 is located on Eastern Avenue, and Champion House Cafe on 1 Butterfield Place, which is the former Comart. Champion House, of course, is a family-owned and oriented restaurant where locals and others dine. So we want to thank them for their sponsorship of For the Record. Let's take a look at the headlines in some of our local news today as well. We can start with the Caymanian Compass, celebrating Cayman's under 15 girls, and we certainly want to congratulate them for their performance during the under 15 championship. And I think the final was last night, and it appears as if Honduras may have won the championship. I hope I got that right. We want to congratulate them as well. But this has been a fine showing for the Cayman Islands, and of course we want to thank the Cayman Islands Football Association. We want to thank FIFA. We want to certainly thank CONCACAF and its president, Mr. Jeff Webb, who's also vice president of FIFA, for such a great showing. We saw where the sister islands were able to enjoy the benefits of this tournament as well. Oh, sorry, Canada, I'm told, won the tournament, not Honduras. Sorry, I'm not sure if that was wishful thinking or what, but we want to congratulate Canada on winning the tournament. And as I was saying, the sister islands certainly got some exposure as well. Several teams, I believe it was 4 teams that were able to play over there, and they resided over there during the course of that tournament. Other headlines in the Cayman Reporter: rampant credit card misuse in government. Certainly something that I'm sure that the Auditor General has and will continue to look at as well. And we want to see about those abuses, whether or not they were abuses, whether or not government in fact has a policy or had a policy at that time in relation to credit card use, and whether or not that policy was communicated to all credit card holders, those holders of government credit cards as well. Also in the Cayman Reporter, we see dust-afoot Cubans passing by Cayman. Never heard that terminology before, dust-afoot. We hear about the U.S. Wet foot, dry foot policy for Cubans, where if they're able to set foot on U.S. soil, then they're able to claim political asylum. If they're unable to set foot and they're found at sea, then they're usually repatriated to Cuba, and we saw quite a bit of repatriation take place last week. Some that were picked up in the area of the Bahamas and were repatriated to Cuba as well. Of course, the dust-afoot ones, as they call them, certainly do affect the Cayman Islands, and there has been a tremendous amount of debate as to whether or not we should entertain the Cuban migrants when they stop here, whether or not we should be assisting them in repairing their boats, providing them with food and water to continue on their journey. And then there are those of us who maintain and believe that we must subscribe to legal migration, and what the Cubans are doing is not legal migration, and as a result of that, other than humanitarian concerns, we should not be assisting them to go to a third country and then to get on into the U.S. as well. What else do we have in the news? Caymanian Compass. Chamber slams FCA, which is the UK Regulatory Authority, for listing Cayman on a list of not necessarily non-compliant companies, but countries where we're still susceptible to money laundering, and of course that is the UK's authority, and we, no doubt, are an overseas territory of the UK. Some of us refer to her as our mother country, and we rely on the UK to protect our interests and to advance our interests, especially internationally. And there are questions as to whether or not that is being done, whether or not there are ulterior motives for grey listing or blacklisting us. Of course, we're in competition with the City of London when it comes to financial services as well. And there are those who refer to the fact that U.S. President Barack Obama won election partly based on the fact that he committed to shutting down tax jurisdictions, low tax jurisdictions, and in particular, he targeted not only the Cayman Islands but also Bermuda as well. Fire ignites again at the landfill. Still problems at the landfill as far as fires are concerned, but landfill fires are not restricted to the Cayman Islands. They happen all over. Just a few weeks ago, we saw the Riverton dump in Jamaica was on fire as well. We see it happening in Bermuda at times. So that's really a part of what happens when you have dumps and the methane gas that basically collects underground. Of course, the debate continues to rage in relation to the dump and whether or not it should remain where it is or whether or not it should move someplace else. Government made a conscious decision to put the dump where it is, not only to put it there, but to expand it by purchasing additional lands for its expansion. And while it may be an inconvenience to some people in that area, it is likely to be an inconvenience somewhere else if we were to move it as well. So that debate rages on, and we will see what that will culminate in at the end of the day. On Friday morning, we had an interesting show where we talked about seafaring in the Cayman Islands, and it is something that we want to continue to do, and hopefully we can have a series on this program and continue to invite our former seamen who had such a great hand in helping to develop the economy of the Cayman Islands, putting us on the right footing, giving us that foundation that we needed, and that helped to start our financial industry, as well. Because without that base, we would not have a financial industry. Folks, it's now 7:43. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have Honorable Marco Archer, Minister of Finance and MLA for the District of Georgetown. We're going to have him with us. Please stay tuned.
For the Record with Orit Connor continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. Before I go to Minister Marco Archer, I just want to point out the from first place to fifth place in the results for the under-15 tournament. So we had Canada, Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago, Honduras, and Cayman in that order. So Cayman was fifth, Honduras fourth. You had Trinidad and Tobago, Haiti, and Canada. And I'm also told that Chelsea Green from the Cayman Islands also won the joint Golden Boot, which is the which is the top scorer in the tournament. So we want to say congratulations to Chelsea for winning or jointly winning the Golden Boot. And we hope we will continue to have more tournaments in the Cayman Islands. We see where government has made where a major investment was made in the 8 bush playing field and the facilities there, and we need to continue to support sports in the Cayman Islands, because that is where we will continue to develop our youth. But without any further ado, Mr. Marco Archer, good morning and welcome back to For the Record again. I know we got you out a little bit early this morning, but we're glad you're here.
Good morning, OC. Good morning, Cayman, and thank you for the opportunity. And just happy to be here, and hopefully we'll have a productive morning, and then it'll continue into a beautiful week.
Thank you. Now, when you were here last, we were actually during the budget session, and the budget session is now over. And one of my first questions that I would ask is that at that time there were projections in terms of where we would be with the 13-14 budget, and how much savings we would realize, whether or not we would realize savings at the end of the day. Have you gotten the final figures yet? Do we have the final figures on the financial year 13-14?
Actually, the 31st of August, I think, is the deadline for submission of financial statements to the Auditor General. So what we would have, of course, at this stage would be unaudited figures. So they're not quite final per se. But they are being prepared now to submit to the Auditor General. And then once he has looked them over, then we can regard those as final. But preliminary numbers, we are still on track for the surplus that we had forecasted, and we are, as well as trying to keep our costs under control significantly. And I guess we have to try and avoid anything that might blow the budget. Certainly, I'll be taking a closer look at credit cards and how they're used, to ensure that we can't continue to make mistakes of the past, and if we're going to, because we have a very tight budget, we cannot afford to increase revenue, so we have to ensure that we look at every area of expenditure and keep those under control. Of course, we still have to try to stimulate the economy wherever we can. You would recall that we had various stimulus measures in there with respect to reduction of import duties and trade and business licenses, and I know that the Minister Panton is looking at those again to see how he can improve those. So we're always trying to improve. Since we can't raise revenue, we have to make sure we control expenditure. So we are looking close at everything that we're doing, and it's the only way to do it. The days of free flowing cash are gone. We probably won't see those again. If we do, it would be for a very long time. So we're taking a close look at everything.
And in terms of controlling expenditures, the government have you prioritized those areas where the focus is going to be? So we're going to, let's say, use as an example education. If you say we're going to focus more on education, that means that other things will take a back seat to it. Not that the other areas would be neglected, but that's the area that we're going to focus in on this financial year, or this portion of the financial year, let's say.
Yeah, that's correct. We have to prioritize, and as I've said to the government, there are times, or there'll be some years when we'll focus on different areas. And this year primarily is education and infrastructure. Of course, we are trying to get those port projects off the ground, the airport and the seaport. And of course, education, and health. We can never set those aside, because that is the future health and growth of your country, education and health. If those two should suffer, then of course everything else will lag behind. So those are our priority areas this year: education, health, and infrastructure. So next year, of course, we haven't decided what is the main focuses yet. But of course, education will continue to be up there. Of course, we're also trying, and within education, I'm speaking broadly. Within education, of course, is that whole area of labor force, employment. They're all within the same ministry. So we have to upskill our younger people as they're coming out of school, and then of course retrain our somewhat older people who've left school for quite some time, ensuring that they are capable of taking on the jobs that the economy is providing. So those are our focus areas. The NWDA is coming on quite well. It's in its infancy stages with respect to what the minister is trying to do. And once those policies have gained ground and taken root, then of course, we should see the fruits of that initiative.
There are those, speaking of the NWDA, who believe that it should be more of an employment agency rather than preparing people for employment. But I think that's a difficult task for them to be an employment agency when you look at the fact that the private sector, does its own recruitment and everything else. It certainly can be a facilitator and work hand in hand with businesses, but I can't see them being an employment agency.
Yeah, I would agree with that, given the fact that, of course, the government cannot compete with the private sector in everything. There are several employment agencies out there, and if it is the perception that those employment agencies are in some way preventing Caymanians from finding employment, then it's the government's responsibility to deal with that, not create a competing agency, which would then divert government resources to get into the area of providing and finding jobs. I think it's the government's responsibility to ensure that there's a level playing field where Caymanians have the opportunity to get the jobs which they are qualified and experienced to do, and of course not to be discriminated against. But it would be, in my humble opinion, it would be counterproductive to create an employment agency within the government.
And you did mention the fact that focus will be on infrastructure as well. And of course, once we start with the infrastructure, the port facility, the airport expansion, that of course will create job opportunities and increase, jobs in the Cayman Islands as well. So that is almost a built-in mechanism there for job growth.
Absolutely. Construction projects are seen as, or the whole construction industry is seen as a leading economic indicator, because of course it speaks of things to come, you know. So it will help to create many jobs. I think it's in the hundreds, given the size of both projects. So that would, and of course then we have to ensure that Caymanians are given first, or given priority for those jobs. I think, if I remember correctly, the airport should start sometime in the first quarter of next year, and then of course the seaport, the cruise berthing port, sometime in either the latter half of next year, perhaps the fourth quarter, or then maybe even the early first quarter of 2016. But we are constrained in how quickly we can do these things, because we are required to perform the various business case analyses, and then of course the environmental impact assessments, and they all take a significant length of time and money. So you may have the idea, you may have the desire, but the actual implementation can take quite some time before you put a shovel in the ground. So but the airport should be in the first quarter of next year, and that would provide a great stimulus, both in terms of employment, as well as just giving tourists the added belief that we will resolve the congestion that they see at the airport. I think it's important that we instill confidence in our business and leisure travelers that the Cayman Islands is doing something about their airport.
Right, and while the period of time that is spent at the airport in a terminal may not be all that long, but that experience for the visitor, not only the visitor, but the residents as well, anyone, the traveling public in general, is extremely important.
Absolutely. I love traveling. I've done a lot of traveling, but the part of traveling that I do hate is the airport. I don't mind the flight. I'm not afraid of flying. It's just the airport.
Yep. And I was speaking while we're on that topic, and we have about 5 minutes before the news, so we may not get through all of it. But we heard the rumblings, about customs and the coding system, for customs. We got over the wedding dress, scenario. I think we've gotten over the and Cayman sometimes just needs something to to lighten us all up.
The small island economy, you must find humor somewhere.
Yeah. But where we were at with that now, we had the news press conference. There was an indication that possibly looking at reducing the number of digits in terms of the code. We haven't heard too many rumblings since the press conference, so it seems as if things are working pretty well. Can you update our listening audience as to where we're at with that?
Absolutely. We are making great progress in what we have set out to do. There is a committee of customs officers and economics and statistics office staff who are working on rolling up the harmonized commodity description and coding system, which is just normally referred to as a harmonized system. The harmonized system has an 8-digit code, and we are trying to roll that up as much as possible. There are some areas where we will be unable to roll it up beyond the 8-digit code. There are other areas where we can roll it up to just 4 codes, and the difference there, of course, is where a particular category of items, if they all have the same import duty tariff rate of, say, 22%, if they all have that same rate, well, then we can roll that up to just a 4-digit level. If there's a particular category of items where you have differing rates within that category, well, then we have to keep it at 8. But again, the customs department will be doing the coding for the importer for a small fee of $5. And throughout the time of implementation, which comes into effect on the 1st of September, we will have people in the customs hall, assisting the various importers to get them familiar with the 4-digit code, which is the head level. And then the next 2 digits are the international level, which is universal across all countries, or common across all countries. And then the other 2 are unique to Cayman, the 8. So we will be in the hall helping people identify, okay, you're doing auto parts. Well, auto parts comes under this particular 4-digit code. You're doing food and beverage, let's just say wine, that would come under this particular 4-digit code. And getting people familiar with a very high level. And because it really is the government's intention that while we're rolling the codes up for the time being, over time, we would still like to see this properly implemented within the country, because it is essential for proper data collection and analyses as to when we're trying to implement policies to either stimulate the economy or to properly track the import of particular items.
And it's also good for the business person as well, because if you want to know where there's high activity in a particular area in terms of importation, if you're looking to get into that area and you're doing some sort of feasibility study, that's where you get that information from in terms of what is being imported into the country, what is being imported more than something else.
Absolutely. It's that level of detail that makes the difference between knowing whether there is a market for a particular item, if you want to provide a service, or there isn't a market for it. So it has benefits both to the government and the private sector, and therefore beneficial to the overall economy. So we will be making those changes. And something else that I mentioned to the Customs Department, on a quarterly basis, we're going to say to you, Mr. Connor, here is a report that lists all of the items that you've imported for the last quarter, and these are the codes that you have used. So if you import the same things over and over, you then are able to become familiar with those codes. Now, I have said to the Customs Department, that is something that we will do for a small fee. It is not something that we are obligated to do, and therefore it's no reason to do it for free. At the end of the day, I want the importers to, we're going to give them as much information as possible for them to become totally familiar with it. And I expect that we'll probably do this for approximately a year. So we're going to handhold and spoon feed for approximately 1 year. And I think, and during that time, of course, we're also going to have additional training courses, which would be of no charge, by industry, so that those within the food and beverage industry will come for a training course, so that they will then be shown the codes that are unique to their industry. The same thing for the auto parts industry, and so on and so forth, so that everyone will have an opportunity to become familiar with what it is that they use most frequently, what codes they use most frequently, so that a year from now, they know it as well as the customs officers themselves.
Folks, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning is the Minister of Finance, Honorable Marco Archer, and MLA for the District of Georgetown. We've been discussing customs. I want you to stay tuned, and we will be back shortly after the news.
For the Record with Orit Connor continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning is none other than Minister of Finance, Honorable Marco Archer, and MLA from the District of Georgetown. I just want to give a shout out and a thank you to Minister Osborne Borden for providing me with those stats and the results of the under 15 tournament. Obviously, it was on Radio Cayman News, but I was on my way from the car into the studio, and I only heard the last part of it when the coach was being interviewed. So I want to thank Minister Borden for that. Obviously, he's listening to our show, and that's good to know as well. And I also want to say that in our local domino group, Mr. Graham Rankin, who's, of course, involved in football as well. He basically made the call and said he expected Canada or Haiti to win the tournament based on his observations in terms of their play and everything else. He also talked about the Honduras team and said that while they were smaller, they were certainly much more technical in terms of their style of play. So I want to give, credit to those people who were able to look into, take a critical look at the playing of football and make some predictions. And I want to thank Minister Borden for that update as well. I also want to remind you that For the Record is brought to you by Champion House Restaurant 2 and Champion House Cafe. Champion House Restaurant 2 is located on Eastern Avenue, and Champion House Cafe on 1 Butterfield Place, which is formerly Comart. Champion House is a family-oriented restaurant where locals and others dine. I also want to remind you that our phone lines are open. We normally see our calls come in around about 8:30, but you can call at any point in time, and as I've already reminded you that, we interrupt our conversations at any juncture to take your calls because we know that what you have to say is important. When we have officials on here, they want to hear from you. They want to hear about your concerns. If you have suggestions, they want to hear about those as well. We talked about the customs coding and the harmonization tariff. If you have issues with that, call in, talk about it. If you're still experiencing problems with it, if you need some explanation in relation to that, please call in as well. And of course, our numbers are, our toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 or on 949-6990. And if you can't call on the telephone or don't want to call, you can email us at fortherecord@candw.ky. And I'm having a little difficulty with the laptop at the moment, but you can also email me at orrett, ORRETT CONNOR @gov.ky. I'm told that we have one caller on the line, so Minister, we're going to take that caller now. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Connor and Minister Archer.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning.
I'm very well. I'd like to, first of all, say a big thank you to Mr. Archer for the job that he's doing and is attempting to do, as difficult as it may be on occasions. But and I'm sure he will be successful as being a very frugal individual. He will be very successful in the challenges. There's one thing that that your government is trying to do that I believe is a good effort in trying to reduce the cost of living. I think there was something mooted that if they would take off duties for certain merchandise, for the merchants coming into Cayman. And whilst I applaud those efforts, I just want to just be reminded, just have a look at how those merchants does things, and it's kind of appalling to say the least, because what they do is the government may drop the rates, but their rates doesn't drop. I mean, we just look at the turtle meat, for example, where the farm reduced its price substantially, and if you go around to the restaurants, it doesn't reflect the price that is being sold at the turtle farm. What I'm going to encourage your government to do is to look at areas that everybody would benefit directly from, such as perhaps more reduction in CUC, cost of fuel, in that area there. Whatever, water consumption, whatever, but not to give to these merchants and mind you, there's a few of them, because I remember, especially the hardware stores, when the government did, I think, the 7% on lumber, I believe it was, building materials. I know, as a matter of fact, that all three of the hardware stores pass that on, and that's commendable. But when you're going to allow, earbuds to determine based on what they are being given by government to pass on to the consumer, that is never going to work, So that is I applaud your government for their efforts, but I think you got to look at it in a sort of a different manner for everybody to reap the benefits. Thanks a lot for your time this morning, gentlemen, and have a good day.
Thank you, caller. And Minister, before you answer him, we have another caller, so we'll take that call and I'll give you an opportunity to answer both. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing fine. My name is Edgar Mendez. I operate a little poster business in West Bay. Now, from time to time, I might have a sewing machine to take to Jamaica because there's nobody here that repairs them. The gentleman that used to repair them, he died a year ago. Now, I don't mind paying to get it down because it's a little bit weighty. It's one of them industrial type sewing machines. I made a nice little box and put it in. When I went to the airport last Friday, that was on the 8th, taking it, the weight of it was 74 pounds. I know I'm allowed 55 pounds on the airplane with any piece of cargo. I know it was heavy, 74 pounds, which is like 19 pounds above the allowed rate. I was charged $175 for the excess weight, which is 19 pounds. I took it to Jamaica, got it fixed, and I came back on the 14th, last Thursday. The same machine, the same airline, and I was charged $75 to bring it back. Now, I am wondering how there was such a big disparity. The same machine on the same carrier by the same person. Why I was charged $175 taking it from Cayman to Jamaica, and I was charged for the same machine $75 bringing it back from Jamaica. How do we equate that? How can we reconcile that? How is that reconcilable? Because it's a $100 disparity, and it was 19 pounds overweight going to Jamaica and 19 pounds overweight coming back. Yet I was charged $175, which to me was very exorbitant, and then 75 coming back from Jamaica. Could you give me some clarification on that?
Okay, caller, stand by, and we'll have the minister answer both questions in the order that he chooses. The minister.
Thank you, sir. I apologize on behalf of the government for what you've experienced with respect to the shipment of your sewing machine to Jamaica for repairs. But unfortunately, it's not something that I myself or even the Minister of Tourism would have direct responsibility for, because it is Cayman Airways, which is a Cayman Islands government-owned company, as opposed to a central government department that we could, just go down to and say what's happening. Cayman Airways is managed and operated, they have a board of directors that would have the direct responsibility for that. So, Mr. Mendez, I would advise you, sir, that the best route of action, and I will raise it today with the Minister for Tourism, so that perhaps he could also mention it. But for there to be $100 difference in what you would charge for the same item, there does appear to be either someone didn't do their job properly, or they were a bit overzealous in doing their job. So, firstly, I will report it to the Minister of Tourism. Perhaps he could then have someone within his ministry look into it. But as well, I would advise you to contact Cayman Airways and provide your receipts and let someone give you an explanation as to why it is that the same item, you would charge the difference of $100, to take it to Jamaica and take it back. Unfortunately, there isn't anything that I myself can do about that for you, sir. But I appreciate you calling. With respect to our first caller, I want to say thanks for the compliment that he's paid myself and the government for the job that we're doing. And I do recognize his concerns in that even though the government in trying to reduce the cost of doing business and hopefully the cost of living, perhaps there are some merchants who aren't passing on the reduced price. Unfortunately, in the absence of price control, and price control isn't something that I would advocate for the country, because of course it would then distort the free market system and our economy. Not having the ability to control prices and dictate prices to merchants, this is an area in which I would hope that the Chamber of Commerce would speak out on. Perhaps I don't know who the merchants are, but given that the Chamber of Commerce is a body that looks after commerce in the country and hopefully sometimes what's in the best interest of consumers, I would expect a statement from the Chamber of Commerce on this, and I would expect the Chamber of Commerce to address its members, not saying that it is their members, but just to ensure that it does not happen with any of their members. So I unfortunately, there isn't anything that the government can do in this area.
And it's certainly the chamber who encourage people to shop locally as well. And if you want that to happen, then whatever relief you receive from government, it is incumbent upon you to pass that on to the consumer if you want to see more activity in your business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm told, Minister, that we have another caller online. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, O.C.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Archer.
Good morning. Good morning.
O.C., I understand that we're going to be doing some remodeling at the airport. I was at the airport on Saturday, and when I pulled up there, I saw all these people standing outside of the main entrance of the airport in a loop, you know. So when I got, my girlfriend went to check in, and I went behind her, and she said to the lady that she's like, you don't have to go in that line. The lady said, yes, you do. And she was like, really? So I said, well, why? She said, well, that's where you got to go to get the security and immigration. So she said, well, John, you go and hold the line while I check in. So I went. So I got to the third of the rope, and then she came out, you know, and get in the line that I was in. I came out the line. But that did not look good. The people are there burning in a hot 12:30 sun in the daytime. I didn't see anyone there offering them a bottle of water, or there was no cover on them when they came from under the main umbrella of the airport. They had to go and stand in the sun then to get in back into the other door to go down to customs and security and immigration. I think if we cannot accommodate all these planes at the same hour of the day, they should be scattered out so we don't have to put these people outside. Suppose it's raining. They're going to go out and stand in the rain as well, too, when they got all 4 and 5 planes on the strip. I really don't think that look good for tourism. And I also want to mention that at the Royal Pier, we got these huge tents down there. And Mr. Archer, if you was to go under them and feel the heat that is penetrating through that plastic on top of those people, you would say that this is not right, because the time is hot right now, and they got to be sitting there all 45 minutes, almost an hour before the tour coming to pick them up to go where they have to go. So they're sitting there under these heat tents that they just put down there a couple of months ago. I don't know. We say we're selling a product. I'm very concerned, and at least we should have they got humongous fans here on the island. You could put some fans under those under those tents or something. Just keep these people cool until they get ready to go. And when they get ready to go and off our pier, then, you know, that's them. But while they're under our umbrella at the present time, we have to keep them secure till they get ready to go in. If they want to go and sit and blow in the sun for 2 hours, then that's on their time, but not on our time under the umbrella waiting for their tour bus to come. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yep, we do, caller. And let's give the minister an opportunity now for him to give you some feedback on it. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jan. Thank you for the call and bringing those things to our attention. Ms. Jan, I do think that they have made some attempts to provide coverage for the crowds at the airport. The difficulty with the airport, of course, is that, and I've had this conversation with the Civil Aviation Authority. The problem is that the airlines all want to arrive around the same window, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn in saying this, but what has been said is that when suggested to them that they come at a different time or that they may move them to a different time, they made it quite clear. This is the time that we want. This is the time that we need. And if we can't have this time, well then we would have to consider whether or not we keep Cayman on our routes. So those are the difficulties that the airports authority faces in being able to provide adequate cover for the number of visitors that are growing. But like I had said earlier, the improvements, the renovation to the airport should start sometime in I think it's the first quarter of next year. So we're hoping that visitors seeing that will realize that they are making efforts to improve the visitor experience, beginning with the airport. So I would hope that a year, 18 months from now, we would look back and say, wow, you remember when it used to be this way, as opposed to what it is now. Concerning the Georgetown cruise dock, I don't know what else can be done there, to be honest with you. I'm not fully versed in everything that's happening on the dock, but I do believe that much of the heat that you would feel on the dock, of course, is the heat radiating from the hard pavement.
Right. Yes.
So you would then have to install some rather elaborate tents, perhaps with ventilation at the top and something to extract the heat. So that's something they could look at. But in terms of doing anything else, the improvements to the port are still a distance away because of the various stages that we have to go through before we can actually start the project.
And what makes it even more difficult is the mere fact that we're sharing a cruise pier along with a cargo pier as well. So there's not a whole lot of room for flexibility, as far as space is concerned. But certainly we want to improve the visitors' experience. We want to ensure that more people get off those cruise ships when they come here, because there are some who choose to stay on board, for instance, because they don't want to take the tenders, on shore as well. So those are the things that we need to look at as well. We're going to take a short break. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record, and my guest with me this morning is Minister of Finance, the Honorable Marco Archer. We're talking about various topics, but when we do come back, the minister wants to talk about the public debt. We want to talk about the public debt as well as the state of the economy. So just remember those two topics, and if you have any questions on those, you can call before we start the conversation or after the conversation starts as well. We ask you to stay tuned while Radio Cayman goes ahead and pays a few bills, because they do have them and we have to get them paid as well. So please stay tuned to the dial. We'll be right back.
For the Record with Orit Connor continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I remind you that my guest in the studio with me this morning is Minister of Finance, the Honorable Marco Archer. Thank you for staying tuned to Radio Cayman. For the Record, we know you're listening. We know you're out there. And those of you, like I said, who have concerns, who have points, suggestions, because we welcome and the government welcomes suggestions. Remember, they can't think of everything and they don't have the answers for everything. A lot of times the feedback comes from you, the public, those of you who feel it. They always say, he who feels it knows it. So you know about it because you feel it. Call in and tell us about it. I want to remind you that we have a toll-free number, 1-800-534-8255, landline 949-8037 and 949-6990. And you can also email us at fortherecord@candw.ky. I'm still not hooked back up yet, but you can email me at Orret, O-R-R-E-T-T dot C-O-N-N-O-R at G-O-V.K-Y. Minister, there is no one who is better positioned to talk about the public debt and the economy than you. You're right in the mix, so I'm going to just hand it over to you, sir. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Orret. um, just to look at briefly at the performance of the economy, both 2013 as well as the first quarter of 2014. You'd recall that the economy grew by 1.2% in 2013, and while it wasn't spectacular, it certainly was deserving of praise, given the fact that many countries are still struggling to just to grow, really. And we grew at 1.2% in real terms in 2013, and our GDP per capita increased from $43,732 to $44,208. So we see improvements there for the overall economy, and inflation was kept at a respectable low of 2.2%. And the only reason for the small growth was primarily because of the international prices on food. Of course, you know that food prices globally are increasing, and we import quite a bit. So, and there was some impact as well on the tariff on tobacco products. So that's 2013 in a nutshell. Turning now looking again at 2013, you'd also recall that our overall unemployment edged up slightly from 6.2 to 6.3%, but the reason for that was because of the increase in unemployment for non-Caymanians. The unemployment for Caymanians actually decreased from 10.5 to 9.4, if I'm not mistaken. So while the overall unemployment rate increased, the unemployment for Caymanians decreased. And there is the argument that some people make, well, why do we even measure unemployment for non-Caymanians? You know, I won't argue that here nor there. The important thing is that the unemployment rate for Caymanians declined significantly, and we expect that to decline even further with the policies that the government are pursuing, as well as overall improvements in the economy. Looking now at the first quarter of 2014 or 2014, the first quarter grew at 1.5%, and the major areas of performance in there, and I should say the first quarter of 2014 grew at 1.5%, whereas the first quarter of 2013 contracted by 0.6%. So it's a significant improvement first quarter compared to first quarter. So that bodes well for the rest of the year, I should think. So the high performing areas of the economy during the first quarter, of course, had to do with wholesale and retail, hotels and restaurants, transport and storage, communications, real estate, renting and business activities, as well as construction. So we're seeing things are gradually improving. We're hoping that the financial industry and insurance services will continue to improve. Of course, government, which plays a significant part of the overall economy, will continue the percentage of government's contribution will continue to decline as we continue to roll back expenditure.
Okay. On that note, can I interrupt you, Minister,
Sure.
so that we can take this caller? Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Yes, hi. Good morning, Minister Marco Archer. Good morning, Mr. Moderator.
Good morning, sir.
Yes.
Good morning.
Quincy Brown here. I want to say I wish you both well on this Monday morning. How's it going?
Very good, Mr.
Going
Brown.
fine, and the same to you, Quincy.
Doing very well. Okay, I was going through my notes just last night. My notes from 7th of August 2008, when the Honorable Leader of Government Business would have been the Honorable Kirk Tibbetts, and in his report at a press briefing, he was speaking about the enactment of the Public Management and Finance Law, which would change government's financial year starting back on the 1st of July 2004. And I remember at that time, the leader of government business, saying that if we had a minister of finance, how things would be different. Well, isn't it pleasing to know that today we do have a minister of finance? I would like to congratulate Mr. Marco Archer, Minister Archer, on the job he's doing thus far. I applaud his honesty and his transparency and his statesman-like qualities that he exudes as he does his job. I would also like to say, Mr. Connor, if you'd allow me to, before I hang up.
Go right ahead,
Even though this is not, thank you, even though this is not dealing with tourism, what came to my mind when we talk about cruise passengers and cruise ships coming to Cayman, unfortunately, a lot of the cruise passengers that not only come to Cayman, but that go on Caribbean cruises or cruises in general, some of them are not wealthy people. A lot of them are middle class or the working class, so they work very hard, save their money to be able to take their family on these 7-day Caribbean cruises. Having said that, what we need in Cayman is some kind of attraction. I mean, Barbados had Rihanna, but Rihanna quit Barbados and gone to the United States, which is doing much better. But some kind of attraction in Cayman that every passenger would want to get off, whether it's to see Barefoot Man, or whether it's to see Notch, or whether it's to see Chuck and Barry, whether it's to see Quincy Brown, whether it's to watch Rundown, whatever, so that they'll realize, hey, we're docking in the Cayman Islands for 6 hours, 7 hours. Diving is good, snorkeling is good, Stingray City, Turtle is good, but look here, they got such and such an attraction that we can't miss. That's what we need to be thinking about. Thanks for letting me share.
And it needs to be local, right? Yeah, that attraction needs to be local. Now, we heard some talk, Minister, about a Ferris wheel, and I thought that was a great idea, not only for tourists coming in, because if you were to equate it to the London Eye, and I don't think it's going to be the size of the London Eye, but when you get to the height of it, the pinnacle, and you get a view of the whole island, it would be an incredible view. Have you heard any more in relation to that project?
Yeah, the London, sorry, not the London Eye. You put those words into my mind. There is some talk of it. I think the promoter is going away to do some more studies on it, and the concept is good. I don't know, to be honest with you, how successful it would be. But at the end of the day, it would be an added attraction, But the concept of a wheel of that sort, I can't think of the Ferris wheel, would be good. As to how quickly people would become tired of it, So, but he's working on it. He's still working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen ideas like at the London Eye, you can have a private one rented. When I was there on it, the one not next to ours, they had a waiter there. They were serving champagne, and it was a private party that was taking place, in there. So there are various usages, for it.
Yeah.
And what we suffer from in Cayman Islands, of course, I don't have to tell you this, is the fact that our population is, of limited size. But we see where people do things. I mean, on a Sunday, for instance, if you see the amount of traffic that heads to the Eastern District, we know that people gravitate towards, where things are. And by having a variety of activities that people can participate in, is that extra plus as well.
Yes, that's correct. Something like goodness, I keep calling it the London Eye. Something like the Ferris wheel. I wonder if the proposed location is probably the best location. It's certainly visible from the cruise ship, and that in itself may be sufficient marketing for it. But perhaps another location more central, so you can get a better view overall, as opposed to being on one end of the island looking somewhere else. But I'm not the investor, so I don't have to worry about the success or failure of it.
But we interrupted you earlier when you were talking about the economy, so if you want to get back on track with that, Minister.
Right, yes. I think I was saying that as government's overall expenditure is reduced, therefore, of course, our percentage contribution to the overall GDP, gross domestic product, or economic activity would obviously decline. So, and even with the rationalization exercise that the government is pursuing at the moment, or considering looking into, waiting on the report to be given to ministers, as we hive off some of these services that the government now provides, you should see an even greater contribution to GDP from the private sector. And therefore, we hope that the services will be provided more effectively, more efficiently, certainly we hope cheaper. And then you can see the benefits of the rationalization exercise, both in improved private sector and the services they offer, as well as a reduced cost of operating government.
Mm-hmm. Now, this whole rationalization process, there are arguments that there are certain areas that government must remain in simply because of the public good, and the fact that if you leave it to the private sector, then people will suffer. So there is an accepted accepted thought that, despite the fact that government may incur losses as a result of it, that it is something that government and only government must do. The private sector cannot do that.
And I would agree with that, in the sense that sometimes you have to look at matters not just in dollars and cents, but from a social perspective. And I think that the government has to be mindful of that, or any government, this one or any future government to come, has to be mindful of that. That sometimes, not because something can be done cheaper by the private sector, does it mean that it is something that you hand over to the private sector. Because many government services would in effect become monopolies. I mean, you create a monopoly, well then, you tie your hands. There's all the argument about put in place the proper legislation and you can regulate. Every country says that and does that. At the end of the day, it's the consumer who feels it. And governments are sometimes very slow to react, even though they have the regulatory powers and authority to do so. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the philosophy that if it's cheaper, the private sector can do it. I believe you look at it, if the private sector can do it cheaper, then you give it to them. I believe you look at each thing, each situation in its own merit, and decide whether or not all of the factors, those being financial, economic, and social, align themselves with the private sector being the best provider for that service, or whether or not the government should retain the responsibility for providing that service.
Okay. Public debt. We go on to that now. Of course.
Actually, before I go there, let me just say that while the first quarter of this year grew at 1.5%, we are forecasting a growth rate of 1.9% for the entire 2014 calendar year, and inflation for the first quarter again was also at 2.3%. So we're seeing respectable and relatively low inflation. So that bodes well for the country. So we're not seeing prices spiking and climbing overall. That is overall. We're looking at the average consumer index as opposed to individual sectors of it. So overall, the rates are remaining at a relatively low and manageable rate of 2.3%, 2.2%. Turning now to public debt. Of course, I was looking at public debt recently and paying closer attention to it as we approach our 2015 year, knowing that there are several bullet bonds that will mature in that year. But just to give the country a snapshot, of course, I'm speaking here in fiscal years, which would be July 1st to June 30th of each, spanning two calendar years, that is. So looking at our public debt as at the 1st of July 2014, it stood at 548.9 million CI. That's the public debt for the Cayman Islands government. And I'll find the figure for the statutory authorities and government-owned companies shortly. But for the central government, the overall figure is 548.9 million, and for statutory authorities and government-owned companies, it is 123.3 million CI dollars. That is as at the 1st of July 2014. Now, during the 13-14 fiscal year, that would be from the 1st of July 2013 to the 30th of June 2014, the country paid $28.5 million in interest expense on its borrowings. This year, we expect to pay, that is between the first of, and I'm going to have to keep saying these months and dates so that you don't get lost.
Sure.
So this fiscal year, from the 1st of July to the 30th of June 2015, 1st of July 2014 to 30th of June 2015, we will pay, in terms of principal, we will pay $25.4 million to service our debt. And the interest on that, of course, is, again, $28.5 million. So you can see there that if we start off at 548.9 and we're going to pay 25.4, then come July 1st, 2015, we would be down to 23.5 million for public debt for central government. Now, looking at the profile of public debt, it's between 30 and 40 maturing over the years, over a 10-year period, each year over a 10-year period. The one with which we paying close attention to, of course, is the 2009 bond issue for 261.3 million CI, or 312 million US dollars. That is a bullet bond.
And can you explain to our listening audience what a bullet bond is, please?
That matures in November 2019. I'll explain the difference. You have amortizing bond structures and you have bullet bond structures. And amortizing structure is just like the typical loan you get at the bank, where you pay interest and principal blended into one payment. So if the loan is $1,000, part of that, if the loan is $100,000 and you're paying $1,000 a month, well, then part of that $1,000 a month includes both interest and principal. So that's an amortized structure. With a bullet bond or a bullet structure, you pay interest periodically. So quarterly or semi-annually, you would pay interest. But at the end of the term for that loan, that bond, you pay the full face value. You pay the full amount that you borrowed. So for that purpose, you either have to create a sinking fund and put aside X amount each year to mature to the date of maturity to retire that.
Yep.
Or you then have to do refinancing, where you might go out for to retire part of it and refinance the rest, which is what we would obviously like to do. So the 2009 bullet bond is the one that we are paying close attention to, and of course we'll put in place the necessary measures to deal with. We do have a sinking fund that we've started. It should have been started a long time ago, but unfortunately, we are doing that now. And so, in another year or two, we will be able to say exactly what course we're going to follow. But I can say to you,
and that would be based on what you've been able to achieve as far as the sinking fund is concerned, and other issues.
Absolutely. And as we see how the economy is progressing, and based on economic growth and other projections, I think it's probably too early at this stage, because we haven't yet seen the full impact of the various major projects on the economy, and even the global economy for that matter. So therefore, it would be in my opinion, premature to just put down numbers knowing that all of the contributing factors will change.
Right.
You know?
And ideally, it would be good if you could retire that bond altogether. But we know realistically, unless you hit the lottery, and government doesn't play the lottery, but unless you had a windfall, of funds, there's no way realistically that it could be done.
Well, we are building our reserves steadily as we go. Which is why we are having to be so prudent in managing our finances, because we do have to build our reserves. The UK requires that we do that, and at that stage, we would see just how much reserves we have. I think we are at that stage. We are projected to have something. Well, even before that, we're projected to have somewhere in the region of 300 to 400 million in reserves, and we would then seek to use a part of that to obviously retire a portion of the debt. Now, you might say, well, why not just seek to repurchase it and then reissue at a lower interest rate, because interest rates, I think that 2009 bond interest rate was 5.95%. Right now, interest rates are lower than that. But because of the cost involved in repurchasing the bond, it isn't economically feasible or financially to repurchase it, because the bond is trading at a premium. And then you'd also have the cost of financing. You'd also have the associated cost of repurchasing, and then the tender offer itself. So overall, if I remember correctly, the figures is it cost us about 45 million CI to repurchase and retender. Now, you would only save about 2 million a year with the reduced interest rate. So the cost of repurchasing and retendering exceeds the interest you would save if you were to try and go and repurchase it with a private placement offering on the market. So I always say, if you find a fire, don't rush to out it, because you might throw fuel on it. Be careful what you do. So we know we can afford it. We just have to keep on managing it, controlling our expenditure, so we never find ourselves in a cash flow issue. And then we can manage the debt, and when we come to the maturity, we have sufficient funds that we can retire some of it and refinance the rest.
Right. Minister, we're going to take a quick break for the news, folks. Stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be right back. Just a short news break.
For the Record with Orit Connor continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I remind you that my guest in the studio with me this morning is the Minister for Finance, Honorable Marco Archer, and also the MLA for the District of Georgetown. We're not talking too much in relation to his district yet, but when we get to the wind up, we'll have him say a few things about his district. You just bear in mind that when members of the Legislative Assembly take up the responsibility or take up ministerial responsibility, then their focus is more so on the national issues than they are on the local issues. But that doesn't mean that your MLAs forget about you during that period of time. It's just that they have less time to spend with you. But I'm sure that Minister Archer is also in touch with his constituencies, and certainly we know that you're in touch with him as well. So he'll talk a little bit about his Georgetown constituency. But right now we're talking about two issues. We're talking about the economy and we're talking about the public debt. And before we broke for the news, Minister Archer was talking about the bullet bond and the one that comes due in a few years' time and what is being done about it. The information may sound a little bit technical, but it is easy for you to follow, and it's information that can only be presented that way in a technical fashion, and the minister has tried to simplify it as much as he could so that the ordinary man on the street can understand, as well as those of you who are in the financial industry, the bankers and those with the deep pockets. But Minister, go right ahead.
Thank you. Yes, as we were saying before we took the break, the cost of trying to repurchase this bond, this 2009 bond, because it is trading at a premium, that cost added to the cost of the private placement and tender offer would at the end of the day exceed the savings that we would derive from reissuing at a lower interest rate. So we just have to ride it out, ensure that we are able to meet our payments as we have been for all this time. I don't see that changing. And then when the bond matures, at that stage, we would then retire as much as we can afford to, and then refinance the balance of it. What the country needs right now isn't knee-jerk reactions. What we need is a clear and stated path as to how we come out from under this debt burden that we found ourselves into. And it's not something that we are going to do overnight. It isn't something that happened overnight. It is something that has to be done over time and in a systematic and sensible manner.
And of course, the international rating agencies are looking at us to see exactly how we handle it. We see the unfortunate issue with Argentina, recently, and their defaulting on their debt, and that has huge implications, for a country when that happens, as well as how you propose to manage the debt that you have. So it has to appear to be in a logical and sustainable fashion for those international rating agencies.
Precisely, and it goes both ways. And we do have a very good rating, but because of that rating that we have, that good rating that we have, well, then our bond trades at a premium.
Yep.
But then
Double-edged sword.
Yes, but then the good rating again also assist us in obtaining lower rates if and when we do have to go and borrow. So it works both ways. But so that's where we are with the bond. We are with the 2009 bond, US $312 million, or CI $261.3 million. The next bullet bond that we will be paying attention to, which is coming up fairly soon next year, the Cayman Islands Development Bank. I think they have a total of 35 million in bullet bonds. I think 4 to 1.8 US million, or 35 CI million. They mature between April and July next year, if I remember correctly. Again, we will retire some of that. The CIDB has X amount set aside for that purpose.
Okay, good to know.
And so we'll retire some of that and then refinance the rest of it. And I know that the CIDB, they've been under a lot of pressure lately, but they are gradually, recovering, and the government, as the government position improves, so too does the CIDB. We do recognize the important role that it plays in providing financing for some lenders. So we have to ensure that survives. But the bond, of course, is a major concern to us. So as I was saying to you, we have just those 2 bullet bonds. Everything else amortized. So up to $548 million within the core government, central government bond, debt profile. Only the bullet bond of 2009 for $261.3 million is only that's the only one that's a bullet bond. So the balance of $287.6 million are all amortized, which means that we pay principal plus interest in our payments, and that's being managed quite well. In terms of statutory authorities and government-owned companies, the SAGCs, as we refer to them as, it is only the CIDB with their 35 million bond that is bullet. All of the SAGCs, they all have amortized So it's, and we will deal with the CIDB next year.
And the other statutory authorities and government companies, they're basically positioned now to manage their debts that they have.
Yeah, they're all managing their debt. Of course, there's the three that receive funding primarily to assist with operational expenses, as well as we fund SAGCs for operational debt obligations and asset acquisitions. Turtle Farm, Cayman Airways, and CIDB. So with the government's injection, they're able to meet their expense. They're able to meet their debt obligations. So there isn't any fear of them not being able to comply with the requirements on that. So all of the SAGCs are in a great position to meet their debt and manage their expenses from that perspective. Some of them obviously have less debt than others, and in a minute I can tell you exactly what each of them would have. Actually,
That would be great.
I'll do that right now. I'll just take a minute to find that table, and we can advise the country as to.
Okay, while you're looking for that, Minister, we'll just remind our public that the phone lines are open and you can call us. Our toll-free number, 1-800-534-8255 or 949-8037, which is not a toll-free number. And then we also have 949-6990. We're talking to Minister Archer. We're talking about public debt. We're talking about the economy. Feel free to call. We've had some callers before. We know you're listening out there. Don't be afraid to call us. And also remember that we're sponsored by Champion House Restaurant 2, which is located on... Champion House Restaurant 2 is located on Eastern Avenue, and Champion House Cafe is on 1 Butterfield Place. And Champion House is a family-oriented restaurant where locals and other dine. So we want to remind you of that, and please feel free to call. Minister, go right ahead, please.
Yes, as I was saying, the various figures would be the National Housing Development Trust. They have approximately 18.3 million in debt. The Water Authority, 12.8. The Health Services Authority, approximately 2 million CI. Cayman Islands Development Bank, approximately 35 million CI. Turtle Farm, 22.6 million CI. Port Authority, approximately 5. And Cayman Airways, approximately 26. So that's the debt profile of our various statutory authorities and government-owned companies.
As it stands now. And most of those are reduced from where they were before as well, I would imagine.
That's correct. And those figures are as at the 30th of June this year. As at 30th of June this year. So, and like I said, none of them have struggled to make these payments. Some of them receive assistance from the government to do so. The government is able to meet its payments. So overall, the country's debt balances are declining. And in the eyes of the rating agencies, we are doing quite well in that we are able to meet our debt obligations, as well as the macroeconomic outlook for our economy is stable. And we are doing things to improve or reduce the government's expenditure. So overall, there isn't anyone who could objectively look at the government of the Cayman Islands and say, you may have a problem in this area or that area. We're doing well overall. So just thinking about that, what we need at this time is for everyone to just accept and understand that the government has the debt in hand.
Under control.
No
need to be alarmed.
No need to be alarmed. It is not something you can report on every day because, of course, you only make periodic payments. So it's not going to decline rapidly every month.
And as we see the public debt continuing to drop, and where it gets to where there is no longer a public debt, then that is where the public would expect to see some improvement as far as they're concerned and the services that are provided to them, because you have relieved yourself of that albatross that you have hanging around you.
Absolutely, but I would caution that you probably would never see the government in a position where they have no debt, but it would always be wise of the government to have low levels of debt,
right.
because it's obviously better to maintain good reserves and borrow if the interest rate is favorable. Yeah, you need your reserves for various reasons, but it would be unwise to use your reserves to do the things that you would otherwise borrow for. You need to keep those reserves in place in the event that there's a natural disaster or something of the sort.
Right.
Or should interest rates rise for whatever reason, internationally, globally, well, then you can use your reserves.
Because we learned a lesson after Hurricane Ivan in terms of what we had to do. We had environmental funds and stuff like that were in place, but they're earmarked specifically for certain things.
Yes.
So we had to resort to what had been budgeted for that financial year for the various government entities for them to divert that to use for the recovery.
Absolutely. And if you're carrying great levels of debt and interest rates start to rise, well, then it'll take up even more of your revenue to service that debt. So it's always a delicate balance. Do you borrow or do you use reserves? But I would never expect to see the country at no time without a debt balance. Certainly not the levels that we had in previous years, but we are reducing those. And speaking of that, I'll just touch now on debt as a percentage of gross domestic product. In the fiscal year 2012-2013, debt accounted for 22% of gross domestic product, or represented 22% of GDP. And I'm trying to explain this in ways that everyone can understand.
Certainly.
In the fiscal year 2013-2014, that declined to 20.2. So from the previous year it was 22, and then 13-14 declined to 20.2%. And in 14-15, at the end of 14-15, it would have declined to 18.5%. So we see that our debt burden continues to decline, which simply means that we are in a better position each year to manage and service our debt.
Is there an acceptable rate internationally that say rating agencies look at?
Well, obviously, the lower the better. But at the end of the day, it isn't so much the percentage. It depends on your cash flow as a nation. Some countries have defaulted as low as 12%. Some have managed higher rates of debt to GDP and not defaulted at all. So it's sort of misleading to look at a lower figure and say you're safe.
Okay, got
it. It all depends on the ability of the country to service its debt. So yeah, I've seen, I think it's one of those Eastern European countries that had a relatively low rate, but it's still defaulted. So there's no real safe number per se. It depends on the health and strength of your economy.
Right. Got you. See, this man knows what he's talking about. We may look at it in simple terms and say the lower the rate, the better it is, but not necessarily. He knows what he's talking about. Go right ahead, sir.
So that's where we're at. And so we're making great strides. And the important thing is the government recognizes the importance of controlling expenditure and putting aside money into the general reserve funds, and of course ensuring that we are able to meet our debt payment obligations. And I must give credit to the staff in the Ministry of Finance. They do an excellent job. Finance for the general public. Finance is, if you picture the government as a wheel, finance is the central hub, and everything else flows in and out of finance. So they're constantly having to manage this information, and they do an excellent job at it. And
Okay.
I want to give credit to them publicly.
Thank you, Minister, for that. We're going to take a quick break. I understand that we have one caller on the line, and caller, we're going to just ask you if you can just hold on for a couple of minutes. It won't be long. After the break, we're going to take your call as soon as we return from the break. Please stay tuned.
For the Record with Orit Connor continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're going to go straight to the phone lines and we're going to take our caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record, and thank you for being so patient.
Oh, thank you very much for taking my call, and good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Archer, it's always good to hear you speak and give your thoughts and, give us a clear picture of what the island's finances are like.
Thank you, Mom.
You're most welcome. And I must say, without what Aunt Suki would call too much slatterment, I would like to say that I am very confident and that you're on top of what's happening. And thank you very much for giving credit to your very fine staff and those who work with you in the Ministry of Finance. That's commendable. Having listened to you, sir, in particular, the stats that you've given as far as the reduction or the decline of your the island's indebtedness, it's so good to know that this is being diminished at this rate. One question I had on reserves, the country's reserves. What percentage of your, I don't know how it's based, whether it's base gross national product. I don't know how this is calculated, but what is the percentage that is used as a benchmark for the country's reserves?
Yeah, we haven't benchmarked it in terms of a percentage of GDP. It can be done. I just haven't done it. But I can tell you that these are all projections. But looking forward to the end of this fiscal year, we should have approximately 250 million in reserves overall. That is across all funds, and I think the general reserve would be somewhere in the region of 125 million out of that, and therefore the other funds would then equate to 125 as well. But there are several funds, and some of which I think they all require approval from the Legislative Assembly to expense monies from those funds.
Caller.
I did. Thank you very much, and I shall continue to listen to what is proving to be a very interesting and informative show. And thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, caller,
Thank you, Ms. Daphne.
for your questions and your observations. We have one more caller on the line. Minister, caller, good morning, and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, gentlemen. Number one from the block.
Morning, number one. How are you?
Well, I'm listening to you.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
I just caught something what the minister said a while ago. Like how Cayman, the government helps Cayman in ways and different ones. I heard him say something about the water authority.
He spoke about the debt that the water authority has, and I think it was around $12 million.
Well, with all the water selling down in Cayman, why should they be in debt?
I'll let the minister explain that to you.
Well, Mr. Hunter, from time to time, any organization, any business of sorts, will borrow for capital investment. You would understand that the Water Authority has extensive capital investments in digging the trenches, laying the pipes, building tanks, and the various things that go with operating the Water Authority. They obviously, sometimes a capital project would be in the millions of dollars. You couldn't divert part of your revenues to deal with that. It would really put your company, in this case, in great difficulty. So you borrow for that purpose, and then from your revenues, you then service the debt that you borrowed for the capital investment. So that's why the Water Authority, as well as any of the other authorities, would have debt balances.
Okay, sir. I just wanted to get an answer because I just didn't understand why. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Very good. Very good question. I guess some people's rationale would be, well, they're making lots of money, from us based on the rates that are charged, so why should they have to borrow? But you clarified it. Minister will be here at 9:27. The floor is going to be yours until we go off the air. So and we'll probably run a little bit over 9:30 if Susan will allow us. So because we want you to be able to get your message out there, exactly what you wanted to present to the public today. We want you to do that. So I'll try not to interrupt, but if we do get any callers, we will take them. But the mic is all yours, sir.
Sure. I'll quickly touch on the things that I need to touch on. Just to recap for the public's benefit, of course, the 2014 fiscal year, we're looking at operating revenues of $657.7 million. That's across the entire 2014 fiscal year. From July 1st, 2014 to June 30th, 2015. Total operating revenues for the year, we are projecting $657.7 million. Total operating expenses, $508.3 million. Interest costs on borrowings, $28.5 million. That gives us an operating surplus for the central government of approximately $120.9 million. And then a net surplus for all of the statutory authorities and government-owned companies combined together, we're looking at about $7.1 million. And then a surplus for the entire public sector, that is central government and statutory authorities and government-owned companies together, would be $128 million. And then, as I said earlier, we expect that as of the 30th of June 2015, our public debt balance would be about $523.5 million for central government. Looking at our some other ratios, I'm looking at the revenue burden, that is central government's revenue compared to nominal GDP. In 2012-13 fiscal year, it was 23.6. In 2013-14 fiscal year, it went up to 24%. And then in the 2014-15 fiscal year, it is expected to decline to 23.2%. That is because of the measures that we put in place, the reduction on duty, import duty and diesel, as well as the stimulus measures for the small businesses and their fees that are payable. The reason for the increase in 13-14 was primarily because of the measures that had been put on by the previous administration that then took effect in 13-14. Looking at expenditure as a percentage of GDP, in fiscal year 2012-13, that was 23.4% of GDP. In the fiscal year 2013-14, it declined to 20% of GDP. And in this current fiscal year, 2014 to 2015, it's anticipated, it is forecast to decline at 20.7% and will continue to decline each year thereafter. So we can see the government is becoming smaller as a percentage of GDP. And then our debt burden is declining, and our revenue burden is also declining. So on a macro level, things are looking good for the Cayman Islands as a whole and for the citizens collectively.
And as a result of all that, you're building up the reserves as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, of course, if you're cutting back on your revenue burden and you expect to build your reserves, you obviously have to cut back on expenditure, right? Which is what we're doing. So I think I've touched on all of the high level numbers that I want to talk about. So I'll take the last few minutes to speak about the district. You're correct that as a minister within the government, my focus can't be solely on the district by itself. I have to look on a national level. But having said that, I still try to visit the various communities, because I believe that it's important that you see people, you let them know that you've taken office, but you haven't forgotten, that you want to build a relationship with them, get to know them, they know you. I like being comfortable with people and people being comfortable with me, and I think that's important as a representative. So for that reason, I still walk around in the neighborhoods. I'll be honest, I've sort of fallen off somewhat during the summer, primarily because of the heat. But during the months of spring and the fall months, that would be January to May primarily, and then October to December. I'm in the communities visiting people, and I attend the community meetings when I'm able to. The police keeps me informed as to when they're having meetings in certain neighborhoods, and if my schedule allows, I attend. I was recently at a meeting in the Red Bay area, where various issues were discussed, and along with the police, the police doing an excellent job in that. I read the correspondence and saw that several things had been actioned within a matter of a week after the meeting had taken place.
Excellent.
And being there at the meeting, I was able to lend my voice as to the things that we could do at the cabinet level, as opposed to things that had to be done at the police level. So it's beneficial that we attend these meetings. With respect to staying in touch with the community, I still keep my weekly constituency offices, clinics at the PPM office on Crew Road. I'm there every Wednesday afternoon from about 3 o'clock onwards. And I'm there unless there is something in the LA. We're in the LA, or there is some unforeseen reason, but I tend to leave that calendar open. So it has to be something of great urgency that I'm not able to go if I'm not in the LA. So those are the ways in which I'm staying in touch with the community. And to me, it's absolutely important. People elected you, they have confidence in you, but they also want to have that personal relationship. And to me, that's absolutely important.
Well, Minister, I want to thank you for being, such an informative guest on our show. You've presented what can sometimes be complicated information. You've presented it in a clear and concise fashion to our listening audience. There is no doubt, based on the calls that we have received, that people have reposed a high degree of confidence in your in your leadership as far as finances of the country is concerned. Certainly crucial, because the international bodies are looking at us to see how we perform. People who are interested in investing in the Cayman Islands are interested to see how we perform and what the financial position, of the government is. And so I want to thank you for that. But that sounds as if the listening public won't let you go. We have another caller online, so we're going to take that call. It's someone who has rejoined us. So caller, good morning and welcome back to For the Record.
Good morning, and I'll make this quick because this gentleman is a busy man. I can hear that. Anyway, thank you for sharing with us too about how you are able to keep in touch and interact with your constituency. Having said that, this is perhaps a suggestion and a bit of advice actually to the listening public, particularly those of your constituency in this morning's session here with OC, and that is that with all that has to be done, a minister also has a family. And those cannot take second place. And I hope that all of the constituents realize that there are times when we make demands, but there's also the very, very important aspect of one's life, and that is that he maintains time, quality time, and nothing comes between what he needs to do with, or she needs to do as far as family is concerned. And so that it's just a matter of offering a word of caution here, that sometimes individuals can become so busy in doing what is not only it's legitimate and it's right, but it does not always necessarily have to take top priority. So I will continue to offer my prayers up for you, Minister Archer, and your staff, and of course for your family, because I'm sure that they have to many times, sort of just simply stand by or sit by and wait until you can finally get to them. But God is able to work all those things out so that you're able to give quality time and attention to your family. But as to the constituents who may be listening this morning, I think we also need to recognize that we have to take that into consideration, that a man or a woman also has family. Thank you so
caller.
much.
Thank you, Ms. Daphne.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, ma'am. I truly appreciate that advice. And just to say that there are times when I really have to sit back and decide which one is more important. Do I attend a social event, or do I do something with my wife and children? And I always sit and think, well, I always stop and think, well, this job is only for a time. My family is forever.
Yep.
And I thank her for that advice.
Okay, and again, thank you, Minister. We know Customs is still working, on their harmonized system, and if there's any time other than when you're actually scheduled to be on, that you want us to make time, for you to be on here so that the public can know exactly what's going on, either you or the Collector of Customs, we want to welcome you to for the record, so that we can give you that time to converse with the general public and to pass on information, on to them. Folks, you've been listening to For the Record. I want to remind you that For the Record was brought to you by Champion House Restaurant 2 and Champion House Cafe. I also want to remind you that Champion House Restaurant 2 is located on Eastern Avenue, and Champion House Cafe is located at 1 Butterfield Place, which is a former Comart. Champion House is a family-oriented restaurant where locals and others dine. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There are people within our communities around us who are not as fortunate as some of us are. I encourage you to reach out, extend a welcoming hand, extend a giving hand to those who are in need. I also encourage you to perform a random act of kindness today if you can. And if you can't, then you should possibly seek to give to a local charity. And we always leave you with the words of Billy Withers, lean on me. Thank you, Minister. Take care, Cayman.